Hi again. Well, I was talking on the fast food sector and basically how um, uh, initially uh, the existence of the cheap labor in the United States was only directed to the farming sector, but fast food sector was not able to get that cheap labor force. And actually, um, in the fast food sector, fast food sector itself is a sector which was developed out of the restaurant sector, and uh, um, it is a kind of modification of the traditional restaurant sector, which is basically uh, in traditional restaurant sector, you need more expert cooks, as well as you also need um, well a more expert service members available. And all this means that you need a certain amount of skill in your restaurant. There were cheaper restaurants where those skills are relatively smaller, but still a certain skill level is necessary. Um, Fast food sector has actually even it is a sector that is kind of attracting middle income and even in some cases high income people. It is a sector where those skills are reduced to minimum with development of the production techniques, just like in the assembly line initially. The skill level necessary has reduced to very low levels in this sector, so they can employ very low skilled people, even lower than traditional unskilled workforce. Um, but this happened in the United States in uh, the 19. For a brief moment, I need to. Okay, I wasn't able to see the time, so I now I can see how much time I have left. So anyway, uh, in the United States, that type of a cheap labor force was not readily available at the time. I mean, most of the unskilled labor were organized in the um, uh, well uh, unions, and they did not. They got relatively high amount of wages, and they want some good working conditions. Well, some residual workforce was still there, but if fast food sector would organize at mass scale, especially, they needed a more reliable workforce, and that they have found in the initially high school students. And in 1970s, for example, there was even an advertisement. That was a time when the youth in the United States was organized in gangs. They uh, also were using a lot of drugs. And the advertisement is showing actually in a black neighborhood where a black young man or boy, you might say, um, is he has his gang friends coming, calling him. He refuses them. He helps an old woman to pass the street, and then everyone is asking what happened to this young man. He has changed, and actually what happened was he has started to work at the McDonald's, for example. The bottom line is, I mean, this establishments are also advertising themselves as a place where, I mean, if a young man, high school student works there, it develops those. I mean, it's kind of a place where those young people are also getting good skills, not only work technical skills, but also life skills. Uh, but all of this has disappeared when it comes to 1980s. At that time, actually, the whole agriculture program, official program, was also cancelled. But the Mexican immigrants continued to come in an illegal way, or in United States is called undocumented way. And when they come, of course, now they also, some of them also work in the agriculture sector, but now agriculture sector is also illegal for them. So some of them start to work in the fast food sector. So fast food sector now got this new labor force. Also, in general, immigration to the United States has increased. So these immigrants have become the core labor force of the fast food sector. As a result, I mean, not anymore. They needed this high school labor force. So basically, this available labor mobility made this fast food sector to change its basic characteristics, and that change also means, I mean, this educational aspect of the McDonald's work, even though if the wage remained the same, this educational aspect of the McDonald's, which at the very least they were spending some money to promote working in McDonald's, that has gone. Probably also, I mean, the flexibility they provided to high school students also has gone, and working conditions have also worsened. Although in detail, that I haven't looked to that in detail, to be honest. So the similar thing has actually happened in the United States in 1800s, where basically there were first factories were also employing young women, educating them. They had dormitories, they had activities like writing poems. When Irish immigrants come to the United States, of course, all of this has disappeared because Irish immigrants could be employed in the factories in a cheaper way without any of these activities. So this promotion of working in the factories for the young people has gone also at that time. Okay. So this last example is actually taken from your book. It is how international trade is affecting not wages in general. This model is specifically looking to the relative supply and demand of skilled and unskilled labor force, and relative wage level, real wage level. Although, of course, now we can use the nominal wage, since the price level for unskilled and skilled people are, you might argue, is the same. And even there, maybe, I mean, we might have some benefit of doubt because the goods that skilled people and unskilled labor people are taking are different. But still, I mean, overall price level is same. So it is most probably safe to assume that price level is same. So the wage ratio could be either nominal wage ratio or the real wage ratio. In that case, it would be the same. So when we have demand and supply, we have relative demand and supply. I mean, demand of skilled labor force relative to unskilled labor force, and the supply of skilled labor force relative to unskilled labor force. Usually, unskilled in the United States, skilled labor force might be, I mean, they might be more or less equal to 1. Maybe, I mean, the ALS over LU. My guess would be that. Although we should check still the recent data. Wage ratio is, of course, different. It could be 10 maybe, maybe higher, basically. Though we are looking to averages, basically. Of course, skilled labor force, when we look averages, there are some people at the top end, and those top end people are pulling the wage up. Anyway, the question is, how can we use this model, simple model, to study the effect of the international trade? So if this is the case, the effect of international trade would basically be set according to the condition of cost of skilled labor and cost of unskilled labor, relative costs. As you know, if relatively it is cheaper to produce certain products, those products will be imported to the country. If relatively it's more expensive in a country to produce those products, they will be imported. If relatively it is more cheap to produce certain products, those products will be exported. So if skilled labor force is relatively more expensive, in that case, the products that require skilled labor force will be exported, and in that case, it will also mean that the unskilled labor force will be relatively cheaper, because we are comparing the relative costs, basically, not absolute costs. In that case, the goods that require more unskilled labor will be exported. The goods that require more skilled labor will be imported if the skilled labor force is relatively more expensive. If skilled labor force is relatively more cheap, in that case, the goods that require more skilled labor force will be exported, because it's cheaper to produce in this country. And the goods that require more unskilled labor force will be imported. Of course, the book takes the case of United States, which basically means that the unskilled labor force is assumed to be more expensive in the United States, because the living standards in general are up. Skilled labor force is assumed, because the skill levels are higher, that's the assumption, is cheaper in the United States. So when there's trade, United States assumed to export goods that require more skilled labor force, which means production of the goods that require more skilled labor force increase, because now you produce for your country plus for exports. The goods that require unskilled labor force are imported, which means the goods that require more unskilled labor force, the production of those goods decreased, because you take them from outside country. You don't produce at least as many of them in your country. And all of this means that initially demand for initially supply will be the same. However, the demand for the skilled labor force, the relative to unskilled labor force, will increase, which means at each relative wage level, basically the demand of skilled to unskilled labor force was determined by the wage level of skilled labor force relative to unskilled labor force. So if the wage level of skilled labor force relative to unskilled labor force is high, in that case demand will be low. But if the skilled labor force relative to unskilled labor force is low, then demand will be high. Basically, because of this trade, because now the goods are exported as the relative cost of the skilled labor force is cheaper in the country, demand for the skilled labor force has increased. Supply initially is the same, because in order to shift from the unskilled labor force to skilled labor force, you need to go to university, basically, which takes time to complete, which means initially international trade will increase the relative wage of skilled labor force to unskilled labor force. Of course, that increase could not be too high. If that is the case, in that case, the export-import relation will be reversed, because skilled labor force will be too expensive. But in time, it's assumed this fact will make more people to study, because now the incentive to study has gone higher, if you remember the human capital chapter. And as a result, the supply will shift, and basically we will get to the same position where basically wage skilled labor force of the wage of the skilled labor force relative to unskilled labor force will be the same. The difference will be the country will have now more skilled labor force relative to unskilled labor force. Of course, we don't take into account college costs. How we assumed college costs remains the same, maybe even free, basically. So this is another example. There are things to discuss on this example, but I'm passing that. Think on them yourself, and if you want, you might send me an email. And in the next part, we will start looking to the questions, practice questions. So see you in the next part.